Tonight we're going to travel way back, not to powdered wigs or pyramids, but to somewhere a bit more pungent. Imagine this. You're walking barefoot through an ancient Syrian marketplace. The sun is a punishing white disk above you, the kind that roasts your brain into soup if you're out too long. The air is thick with dust, donkey breath, and the scent of spices you can't name. Someone yells something at you in a language that's mostly vowels. A chicken escapes under a stall. Your armpits. Catastrophic. And you've still got a full afternoon of bartering, dodging carts, and pretending you aren't melting into your tunic. You smell terrible. But so does everyone else. It's not your fault. Bathing isn't exactly the kind of daily ritual we take for granted now. Water is precious. Showers, not a thing. And deodorant. The closest you've got is a lemon wedge and good intentions. So the scent of sweat, livestock, and open-air fish sales becomes your baseline. It's not exactly a luxury spa. It's survival. Kind of like wearing your own funk-like armor. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far we drift together. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You turn a corner in that market and duck beneath a frayed awning. The shade helps. You pass stacks of dyed fabric, all of them stained at the edges by fingers far too dirty to be handling silk. You know what you need, but you're also just kind of meandering, because the human brain's been procrastinating long before the internet existed. Eventually, you notice something odd, a young boy, no older than 7, pouring what looks like leftover stew onto a dirt patch behind a butcher's stall. But the smell isn't meat. It's burnt fat. And ash. The goop splashes over the dirt and collects in a sticky grey puddle. You wrinkle your nose. But then, something catches your eye. Where the mixture hits a flat stone, it starts to bubble just a little. And the stone, which had been smeared with all kinds of street grime, now looks noticeably cleaner. Strange, right? You don't know it yet, but you're looking at the early ghosts of what we'd later call soap. Not a bar of Dove or a bubbly body wash. No lavender scent. No frosted bottle that promises to detoxify your aura. Just burnt ashes from last night's fire and rendered animal fat dumped by people with zero intention of making anything useful. Or maybe they knew a little. Maybe. Historians still argue whether these ancient Syrians knew they were cleaning things or if they just liked playing with goop. There's no surviving instruction manual, no clay tablet labeled DIY soap for beginners. But we do know that in regions like this, where cooking oils and fire were everyday staples, the raw materials were there. It was only a matter of messy, smelly time. And here's a weird twist for you. That greyish fatty sludge that no one thought twice about. It might have stuck to hands, pots, and clothes in ways that accidentally made them cleaner. Someone may have noticed their hands weren't just oily, but a bit slick, a bit smooth, and maybe not as stinky as before. Of course, no one's jumping up and inventing a brand yet. There's no ancient Syrian Shark Tank where someone pitches sudsumud to a room of stone-faced kings. This is still the stage of weird leftovers, and why is my stew pot so clean after last week's fire? Still, someone's paying attention. Now you're leaning against a stone wall, pretending not to eavesdrop as 2 merchants argue over the price of dyed wool. The younger one has black smudges up to his elbows, but something about the skin underneath looks clean. Not hospital clean, but less stained. Less raw. It hits you suddenly, the ash and fat. He must have been the one mixing that stuff earlier. Not for fun. For function. The sun inches lower in the sky. You hear the slow creak of an ox cart, the clatter of bronze bowls, a distant cough that tells you lung disease probably exists but doesn't have a name yet. And even though everything around you is still dirty, there's this little whisper of hope. Someone, somewhere, just figured out a way to clean something without a river, a prayer, or a sand scrubbing ritual. But don't get too excited. This proto-soap isn't catching on fast. There's no village-wide announcement. No one's handing out samples. Most people in this time still think dirt is just part of being alive. Some even think too much washing makes you sick. And the gods? Oh, they probably don't care whether your hands are clean as long as your sacrifices are on time. Still, as you duck into a shaded alleyway and flick some of that mystery sludge off your sandal, something tells you that this sticky, bubbling mess isn't going to stay a secret forever. It's messy. It's gross. And it just might be the future. You follow the boy from earlier, the one who dumped the fattened ash stew behind the butcher's stall. He's barefoot, humming a tune you don't recognize, and his hands, still coated with that strange grey substance. He wipes them on his tunic like it's no big deal, and for him, it isn't. He doesn't know his part of history. He's just trying to keep the flies off. You slip into the back alley where the older women work. It's darker here, the sun blocked by stacked pottery and hanging baskets of herbs drying in the open air. A warm, bitter smell clings to the walls like burned meat, boiled bone, and last year's bad decisions. This is the work zone, where old fat goes to die. You crouch next to an elderly woman stirring something thick over a clay brazier. It bubbles slowly, threatening to congeal. She doesn't flinch as the steam rolls over her. In fact, she looks pleased. She's stirring a slurry of sheep fat, leftover olive oil, and yep, you recognize it now, ashes. Not the fine white kind, but chunky grey clumps from the fire pit. She flicks a glance at you. Then back to her mixture. She isn't a scientist. She doesn't think of herself as an inventor. But she knows this gunk cuts through grease. When she smears it on the inside of a pot and scrubs it with dry straw, the soot lifts. The scent lingers, sure, but it's the clean kind of smoke. Not the filthy kind. You lean in. The mixture is warm, sticky, and has a vaguely sweet smell under all that char. It's kind of mesmerizing. A fringe detail most people don't know. This process of mixing fat with alkaline ash, especially hardwood ash, produces a basic chemical reaction called saponification. No one back then knew the word, of course. But your nose tells you something's happening. Something a little magical. The oily mess is turning into something less gross. Something usable. Historians still argue whether this was deliberate innovation or happy accident. Some say it was pure trial and error, primitive people just trying not to waste anything. Others argue it was low-key genius, driven by necessity and passed down orally, generation to generation. Was it Grandma's secret recipe? A temple girl's mess-up? A clever way to reuse cooking waste? You know one thing for sure, it's working. The woman drizzles a little water into the mixture, and it fizzes faintly. She grunts in satisfaction. Then she scoops a handful of the warm mush and begins scrubbing a hide, freshly skinned, not yet cured. The soap-like paste eats through the gore with startling ease. You'd almost call it elegant if it didn't smell like death and breakfast. Now, here's the kicker. This wasn't done just for cleanliness. Not always. Sometimes it was about preparing hides, polishing bronze, or even softening coarse fabrics. It was utilitarian, not hygienic. No one's saying, this will prevent disease. That's not on the radar. They're just trying to survive the day with functional tools, cleanish clothes, and fewer flies. Still, you catch a glimpse of something deeper, an understanding that certain combinations do improve the world around you. Even if you can't explain why. You hang back as the woman pours the mixture into a shallow bowl to cool. Later, she'll slice it into hunks with a dull knife. Not bars. More like lumps. Ugly little bricks of proto-soap. She sells them to traders who don't ask too many questions. You wonder what they think it is: ointment, Glue. Cooking grease. One of her grandsons wanders over and wipes his filthy hands on one of the cooling bricks. Then he rinses them in a basin of water and blinks in surprise. You can almost hear his tiny brain filing that away for later. And now you get it, the magic wasn't lightning in a bottle. It was old ladies and backyard experiments. You realize how many inventions in history probably came from people just trying to clean up a mess they didn't plan to make. You step outside and glance up at the smoky sky. A vendor yells about figures. Someone drops a clay pot. A goat screams like it owes money. Life goes on. And somewhere in the background of all this chaos, someone just made something that might outlive their name. It's funny, isn't it? You've watched modern inventors with lab coats and computer models try to replicate perfection. But here, it's fire, fat, and instinct. Not a clean lab bench in sight. And the result? Something that works. Something primitive, but powerful. You kick a stone into the alley. It skitters toward the shadows where more of that soapy sludge pools at the base of a wall. Maybe a century from now, someone will write a poem about this stuff. Or try to mass produce it. But right now, it's just what it is. Useful. Ugly. Accidental. And a little beautiful. You head toward the pottery district, partly because your feet are sore and you've heard the kill fires keep the streets warm, but mostly because the pots here hold more secrets than the people selling them. The clink of ceramic echoes through narrow alleyways, as apprentices lug stacks of half-dried bowls and jars, shouting warnings like it's not already obvious they're one stumble away from total pottery annihilation. The air is dry and sharp, flavored with burnt clay and smoke, and you duck into the low arch of a workshop with blackened walls and glowing embers. Inside, the heat hugs you like an aggressive uncle. Rows of amphorae, jars, and basins line the shelves, some glazed, some raw, all of them coated in the fine dust that never quite goes away in this part of the world. But you're not here for pottery. You're here for residue. One particular pot catches your eye. It's old, well-used, lopsided, and crusted at the rim with something greyish-yellow, flaky like dried sap. The shopkeeper sees you staring, chuckles, and says something about how no matter what they store in that one, the sides always feel slippery. Not oily. Not greasy. Just slick. You lean in and touch it. He's right. This is the kind of clue that historians drool over in dusty academic journals. Ancient vessels found with residues containing animal fats and plant-based alkaline minerals, traces of what could only be described as early soap components. But here, it's just a gross old pot that won't wash clean. And yet, it does clean. When the workers rinse their hands inside it after molding clay, they notice their fingers come out smoother. Less stained. It's not just the water. It's what clings to the pot's interior. This isn't alchemy. Not really. But it is chemistry, in its earliest form. Here's the fringe tidbit. Archaeologists have found vessels in the region, especially around ancient Mesopotamia and northern Syria, that suggest soap-like residues clung to the walls of containers used for cooking or oil storage. Not because someone set out to make soap, but because the repeated heating of oils and interaction with ash-contaminated water left behind a gunky substance that, when rehydrated, foamed slightly and reduced grime. So, accidental? Yes. Reproducible? Also yes. You watch a young apprentice dump some used olive oil into a cracked pot, probably to toss later, but then wash the same vessel out with leftover charcoal water. The swirl of brown-black slop leaves behind a streak of greyish residue. He mutters about the stink but keeps using it. Historians still argue whether these interactions with residue were intentional. Did these early artisans mean to harness this slick goop for cleaning, or was it just a fortunate side effect of their daily grind? Either way, repetition turned accident into routine. And routine, eventually, becomes culture. The master potter tells you that the workshop's cleaning water always turns a little foamy after scrubbing certain pots. He doesn't call it soap, but he knows it works better than plain water. And he's not changing his method anytime soon. Outside, you spot a curious scene, a woman scrubbing her sandals with a cloth dipped in greyish paste, more of that fat ash residue, scooped out of an old basin near the kiln. She's not being delicate about it either. Just grinding that stuff in like she's trying to punish the leather for existing. And lo and behold, layers of grime lift off. The sandals are still worn, but now they have a faint, clean sheen. This is where you begin to understand. Soap wasn't a single eureka moment. It was a series of quiet observations, repeated 1,000 times over generations. It was dirty pots that refused to stay dirty. Clay jars that taught people more chemistry than any scroll ever could. Greasy hands that came out clean without anyone fully knowing why. And slowly, very slowly, it started to matter. There's no written record from this time saying, Step 1, mix fat with ash. Step 2, profit. No branding, no formalization. But through pot residue, smoke, and trial by mess, early Syrian communities stumbled into one of humanity's most underrated inventions. Think about it. You live in a world where filth is constant: dirt, blood, sweat, oil. And yet, right here in a sweaty pottery shop, someone just figured out that certain combinations of waste byproducts create something that lifts filth off skin. It's not just functional. It's transformative. You step outside, the sunlight hitting your face like a slap, and the smell of smoke clinging to your clothes. A dog barks at a goat, the usual street chaos. You take one last glance at the potter's shop, and you can't help but grin. Because while the world thinks magic is found in temples or palaces, you just watched it bubble out of an old cooking pot. You wander further along the dusty streets, slipping through the morning crowd as vendors bark and barter for your attention. The smell of the city shifts the deeper you go: less smoke, more sweat, more livestock, more humanity in its rawest form. Eventually, you find yourself near a caravan stop, where traders from all over the ancient Near East are unloading goods: textiles from the East, lapis lazuli from far-off mines, strange herbs wrapped in bundles of woven reeds. You sit beneath an awning for a moment, sipping something warm and vaguely nutty from a cracked clay cup, when you overhear two men arguing in a language not quite Syrian. You recognize a few words: Babylon, cleansing, and oddly, mush. It's enough to make you lean in. One of them gestures to a bowl he's pulled from his pack. It's wrapped carefully, lined with what looks like dried reeds, and smeared inside with a sticky, beige residue. The other man snorts. That's not soap, he says, or, well, something to that effect. That's sludge. The bowl is passed around, and you get a look. It's the same color as the ash-fat mixture the old woman was stirring the other day. Only here, it smells faintly of bitter herbs, like someone tried to perfume it but gave up halfway through. Turns out, these traders just came up from the Babylonian heartland, where similar goopy pastes have been in use for generations. But here's the catch: no one agrees on what it's for. Some use it to wash clothes. Others swear it cures skin rashes. A few say it's a base for treating leather. But no one calls it soap in the way you understand the word today. And definitely no one is selling it in neatly wrapped squares. Still, the similarities are too striking to ignore. Historians still argue whether the early Babylonians developed soap independently or if knowledge trickled westward or eastward through trade routes and gossip. Ancient cuneiform tablets dating as far back as 2800 BCE describe a kind of washing paste made from fats and alkaline salts. But here's the historical plot twist: those tablets never specifically say the stuff was used for washing the body. Some scholars insist it was used for laundering wool, preparing textiles, or purifying objects during rituals, not necessarily people. So maybe your Syrian protosoap isn't alone after all. Maybe there's a whole underground world of ancient people accidentally discovering the same thing, miles apart, languages apart, with no idea they're all foaming toward the same future. That bowl in the trader's hands? It's a tiny testament to convergence of ideas, accidents, and trial and error victories across cultures. Like the universe decided we'd had enough of stinking and just nudged several civilizations toward saponification at once. You trail the traders as they pack up their goods, their animals bleating in protest. You pass a donkey with so many baskets tied to its back it looks like a woven fortress on hooves. One of the traders pats the beast and, in a surprisingly tender moment, wipes its ears with a damp cloth dipped in that soapy sludge. The donkey flicks its ears but stays still. You wonder, did it feel better? Or cleaner? Fringe detail time. Some believe early uses of these soaps weren't meant for hygiene at all but were medicinal, used to treat skin diseases, insect bites, or spiritual ailments thought to be clinging to the skin. If you smelled better afterward, that was just a bonus. Cleanliness wasn't yet holiness. It was more like functional magic. You head back toward the city, the sun now higher and crueler. Your feet ache. You're dusty, sweaty, and increasingly aware of how badly you want a long soak in anything not full of camel hair and street grit. But now your eyes are wide open. Because you've seen the ingredients. You've seen the bowls. You've seen the people, none of them scientists, yet all of them edging closer to discovery with each scraped pot and each rinsed rag. Soap wasn't born in a single moment, in a single place. It was coaxed into being by countless hands stirring fat into ash, rinsing pots in mineral water, cleaning hides and rags without fully understanding the why. But maybe they didn't need to understand. Maybe using it, passing it down, mixing it again, swearing by it, that was enough. You pause by a shallow river where a group of women scrub clothes against stones. You watch one of them pull out a small lump of what looks like hardened fat clay. She rubs it on the linen. It foams, just a little. Her hands are stained, her back bent from years of this work, but she smiles. She doesn't call it innovation. She calls it Tuesday. And somewhere, maybe in Babylon or maybe in Aleppo, someone else is doing the same thing, convinced they're the only ones who've cracked the mystery. Spoiler alert. They haven't. But they're close. You're drawn toward the temple district now, where the sandstone glows honeygold under the climbing sun, and the air changes, just slightly. It smells less like people and more like something holy. Incense. Crushed herbs. Old blood. You pass a row of shrines and notice priests moving with deliberate grace, their white robes somehow unstained in a world that's mostly grime. You're not entirely sure how that's possible, but you're starting to have a guess. One of the priests stands near a copper basin, dipping his hands into water before entering the inner sanctum. You pause nearby, pretending to admire a carved relief of a lion devouring a star, but your real focus is on the man's ritual: water, ash, oil. In that exact order. He rubs his hands together, slowly and firmly. Then he dries them on a linen cloth hanging from a hook. His skin glistens, not oily, not wet. Just clean. Or what passed for clean when demons and dirt were thought to walk side by side. Historians still argue whether temple cleansing rituals in ancient Syria and Mesopotamia were symbolic, practical, or both. But what's clear, even now as you watch the priest repeat his wash before touching a sacred idol, is that cleanliness had spiritual weight. To approach the gods, you had to be physically purified, even if you had no clue about microbes or bacteria. Fringe theory time. Some scholars believe the very earliest soap in temples wasn't for people at all, it was for statues. Gods don't like being dirty, apparently. Offerings were often accompanied by ritual anointings, olive oil for luster, then ash water to cleanse, then incense smoke to seal in the divinity. The god statues weren't just decorations. They were believed to house actual divine presence. Keeping them clean wasn't vanity, it was respect. You step inside one of the temple courtyards and spot a young girl scrubbing a stone floor with a cloth dipped in something cloudy and grey. She's humming to herself, half distracted, but her technique is practiced. She dips, rubs, scrubs, and the grime lifts. You wonder if she even knows the mixture she's using is chemically similar to modern soap. Probably not. It's just what her mother showed her. And her mother before that. She notices you staring and smiles, holding up the cloth like she's offering you a chance to help. You shake your head, and she shrugs, going back to her work. The water in the basin swirls, catching the light. Little bubbles pop along the surface, not big ones, not like modern soap lather, but just enough to catch your attention. This moment sticks with you. Because it's quiet. It's not a market scene. Not a trade deal. It's just a girl cleaning the floor of a place that means something. And she's using a substance born from fire, fat, and patience. Nearby, a temple worker grinds herbs in a bowl, laurel, maybe, or crushed myrtle, and stirs them into oil. He adds a pinch of ash from a sacred fire, murmurs a quick prayer, then sets the mixture aside to steep. You recognize it now. Another accidental soap. Only this one's got divine approval. You linger in the shadows, watching as worshippers step forward to offer grain or honey or small coins. Each one pauses at the copper basin. Some wash. Others just splash. But the ritual is there. The connection between physical cleansing and spiritual readiness. And maybe, just maybe, the realization that whatever's in that water is doing more than washing away dust. There's a story told among the local elders that one of the high priests, centuries ago, fell ill after skipping the purification steps. A curse, they said. The gods' disapproval. But you suspect it might have been more bacterial than biblical. Still, the lesson stuck. Wash your hands, or face divine wrath. Seems like a solid early public health message, even if the branding is a little dramatic. You wander to the edge of the temple district, where a pile of discarded ritual items waits to be burned or buried. Among them, half-empty jars, sticky with residue. You pry one open and smell it. Ash. Oil. Something green and sharp. Your fingertips feel slick, and instinctively, you rub them together. They feel better. Clean. Ancient soap, tucked inside a forgotten jar meant for gods. It hits you then, religion wasn't just the birthplace of law and order. It was also one of the earliest keepers of hygiene. Not out of scientific intent, but sacred obligation. Because if the gods demanded purity, well, you'd better find something to scrub with. You take one last look at the temples glowing in the late morning light, their columns casting long, solemn shadows. And even though no one here has uttered the word soap, you know now it's everywhere. Quietly foaming its way into the rituals, the myths, and the muscles of everyday life. You leave the solemn hush of the temple district and head north, the air shifting as you move toward a city that hums with a different kind of energy. Aleppo. Or as it's known in this era, something like Halab, a city of traders, tanners, olive growers, and, unbeknownst to most of them, soap pioneers. The roads into Aleppo are lined with olive groves, and even now, in this dusty age of sandals and sunburns, the trees shimmer with silvery green leaves that flash like coins in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, women are crushing the fruit under stone presses, extracting that rich, golden oil that makes everything in the ancient world smell either heavenly or horrible depending on the additives. You follow your nose, because that's really the only navigation tool you've got, and the scent leads you to a wide-open courtyard, where an enormous vat is bubbling like a witch's stew. Several workers are stirring it with long wooden paddles, their robes streaked with stains in varying shades of grey and green. Whatever they're cooking, it's thick. It gurgles with that faintly alarming sound of something transforming. Someone tosses a pinch of white powder into the mix, and the bubbling increases. The whole courtyard smells like olives, smoke, and wet stone. And there it is again, that faint note of sharpness, of something clean fighting to be born. This, you realize, is Aleppo's great mistake turned miracle. Historians still argue whether the original creators of Aleppo soap knew what they were doing, or if they just kept repeating a weirdly effective accident until someone finally said, "Let's just make a business out of this." But the results don't lie. What they're making here isn't just goop. It's soap, real soap, with oil, lye, and heat working in strange harmony. Here's the weird part. The lye isn't something they buy. It's not a product, it's a byproduct, leached from burned plant ash and dissolved in water. The water itself sometimes comes from ancient limestone wells, naturally alkaline and perfect for kickstarting saponification. That's the magic combo: oil from olives, lye from plant ash, and time. You spot a worker slicing a hardened green block that's been cooling in wooden molds. The inside is still soft, almost buttery, but the edges are firm. The block smells earthy, sharp, medicinal. It's not floral. It's not sweet. But it smells healthy. Like something that would fix a bad rash or a guilty conscience. He stacks the bars on a drying rack, wooden slats set high enough off the ground to catch the breeze. These blocks will rest there for months. Maybe even a year. Aleppo soap is patient. It's not for a quick wash. It's for the long game. Fringe tidbit: Aleppo soap, still made today, by the way, is one of the earliest true soaps, containing sodium hydroxide and laurel oil. Laurel oil is the kicker. Derived from the bay laurel plant, it adds antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties. And a distinctive scent you'll never forget once it hits your nose. And right now, you're inhaling it in buckets. An older man with hands like tree bark scoops up a fresh bar and rubs it on his forearms. His skin glistens, and the smell clings to the air between you like a handshake. He gives you a nod. He doesn't say much, but his smile says, "This is good. This is right." There's something almost sacred about the entire process. The heating, the cutting, the curing. It feels like a ritual, but it's not happening in a temple. It's happening in someone's backyard, with mud underfoot and chickens pecking at the corners of the workshop. And here's where it clicks. This isn't accidental anymore. What started as sloppy leftovers in a pot has evolved into a full-blown craft. The makers might not understand the chemistry, but they understand the ratios, the temperatures, the patience. They know too much lye burns the skin. Too little, and it doesn't clean. They adjust by feel, by smell, by memory. You help stack a few blocks carefully, because the soap is still soft and your hands are slick just from touching it. And it dawns on you, this place, Aleppo, will be known for this centuries from now. Long after the empires fall and the markets crumble, this soap will still be made. With the same ingredients, the same process, the same scent, and maybe even the same jokes like the one you hear now, as a boy drops a bar and his father mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "That's coming out of your inheritance." You laugh under your breath and rub your fingers together. They feel cleaner than they've been in days. Aleppo didn't invent soap from scratch, but it refined it, formalized it, gave it shape and structure. What began as burnt fat and backyard science has become a commodity, a tradition passed down not just through bloodlines but through hands and scents and cured slabs of green gold magic. And as the sun sets over the rooftops and the scent of laurel clings to your tunic, you can't help but think, you just watched civilization move one quiet step closer to comfort. You're back on the road again, feet sore from wandering, sandals dusted with Aleppo clay, and your tunic still carrying the sharp green bite of laurel oil. But now you're hearing something curious as you pass a camp of Roman traders pitched just outside the city walls. They're loud, naturally. One is swearing about donkeys, another about taxes, and a third is waving a chunk of something brownish and waxy in the air like it's a prize. "Sapo," he yells. "Imported. From Gaul. Smells like pine and dignity." You pause. Sapo? That's not a word you've heard in Aleppo. Or Babylon. Or among the temple priests. It's not Syrian. It's not even Semitic. And what he's holding? It doesn't look like Aleppo soap. It's glossier, heavier, almost waxy. Smells like resin and a bad decision. The Romans are trading it like it's exotic gold. They're laughing, scrubbing it into their arms with exaggerated flair, convinced they're the cleanest men alive. You, having just seen the real deal back in Aleppo, know better. So here's the historical confusion. The word sapo, which survives in Latin and eventually becomes the root for soap in many modern languages, probably originated far from Syria. Most believe it came from Gaul, the ancient region now known as France. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder describe it as a mixture of animal fat and ashes used more by barbarians for dyeing hair red than washing bodies. Yeah, hair dye, not hygiene. So when Romans brought back this sapo stuff, they may have thought it was a beauty product, not a cleaning agent. Pliny even sneers at it in his writing, dismissing it as a novelty. Meanwhile, in Syria, people were quietly making real, functional soap with laurel and lye. No drama, no marketing, just generations of bubbling cauldrons and smooth-skinned hands. Historians still argue whether the Roman sapo and the Syrian laurel soap were ever connected. There's no clear line of transmission. Some scholars suggest Roman soldiers stationed in the eastern provinces may have encountered Syrian soap and lumped it in with their existing sapo terminology, causing a massive historical mix-up. Others believe the two developed independently, their only real overlap being that both were sticky, smelly, and mildly effective. You watch as one Roman trader starts lathering up, only the stuff doesn't really lather. It smears. It sort of sits on the skin like oily paint. He frowns and sniffs his fingers. "Maybe it needs more ash," he mutters. A Syrian boy nearby giggles and offers him a chunk of Aleppo soap. No branding, no sales pitch, just the real stuff. The Roman tries it, and his eyes widen as it lathers, softly, just enough to catch the sun. The scent is sharper, cleaner. The Roman nods, impressed, but you can see the gears turning in his head. He's wondering if he can rename it, repackage it, make it Roman. That's kind of what they do. You chuckle to yourself. It's a pattern you'll see repeated over and over again in history. A local invention gets noticed, renamed, and eventually becomes a Roman discovery. Doesn't matter who actually made it first. The empire always finds a way to slap its stamp on the packaging. Fringe tidbit: there are records of Roman baths using all kinds of scented oils and scrapers, strigils, to clean the skin, but very little evidence that real soap, was used in public bathhouses during the empire's heyday. Some believe soap was considered too rustic, too foreign, too non-Roman. Until, of course, it wasn't. You stroll through the camp, where the Roman traders are now deep in argument about which soap makes you look richer. One claims the Gaulish kind makes his hair shinier. Another insists the Syrian version burns the dirt off. A third says he doesn't trust anything green. You shake your head and move on, realizing the branding confusion has already begun. The word soap will soon spread westward, carrying this muddled Roman origin story with it. Meanwhile, the Syrians, who never called it sapo to begin with, will keep stirring, curing, and perfecting their blend in quiet backyards and sun-baked courtyards. You glance at your hands. They're still faintly scented with laurel, soft from the Aleppo blend. And you smile, knowing that somewhere down the line, someone will rediscover this soap, claim it as new, and put it in a $40 bottle at a boutique shop. But it started here. With ashes. With oil. With no one trying to invent anything. just trying to get the goat grease off their hands. You leave the Roman camp behind as twilight begins to settle in. The light softens, taking the edge off the dust and hard corners of the city. Everything starts to feel quieter, slower. But the air still hums with movement, and your feet guide you toward the edge of the Tanners district, easily the worst-smelling part of any ancient city. You know you're close before you even get there. The scent hits you like a punch: sour, rotting flesh, fermented urine, wet hair, and a background note of what died here and why is it still dying. You'd think no one would choose to spend their lives in a place like this. And yet, here you are. And so are they. The Tanners are busy, stomping on animal skins in shallow pits. Their feet dyed from years of chemical cocktails. They work fast, hands raw from lye and lime, their clothes stiff with the ghosts of 1,000 hides. It's dirty work, literally and figuratively, but it's vital. And weirdly enough, it's tied, once again, to the origins of soap. Because here, in these pits of grime and bubbling caustic stew, the knowledge of how to break things down, flesh, fat, filth, is surprisingly advanced. Historians still argue whether the tanneries were among the first places where real soap was purposefully created. They had the ingredients: alkaline substances from urine or lime, fatty animal remains, and heat. The goal wasn't cleanliness, it was utility. Breaking down hair, loosening flesh from hides, softening stiff leather. But somewhere along the way, someone must have noticed what that same paste did to their hands. A fringe detail most don't realize. Tanners often rubbed fat-based mixtures into their own skin, not because they were pampering themselves, but because it helped protect against the chemical burn of the pits. That same greasy ash paste used on leather began to be used on human skin as a barrier. Eventually, it became clear that it didn't just protect, it cleaned. You watch as a young apprentice scoops a ladle of grayish paste, something between soup and cement, and smears it over a freshly dehaired hide. He works it in with a worn brush, muttering under his breath about how this batch is better. You edge closer and ask what's in it. He grins. Don't know. My uncle makes it. He says the trick is goat tallow and barley straw ash. If it fizzes, it's working. Fizzing. That word again. You're starting to notice how often these early soap makers, intentional or not, describe their concoctions in terms of feel. How it bubbles. How it slips. How it bites the dirt without biting the skin. You can't help but marvel at the chemistry being performed with nothing but instinct and inherited technique. It's artisanal chaos. And it's effective. One of the older tanners calls over his shoulder, "You want to know if something's good? Check your fingernails after. If you can see the half-moons, it's clean enough." You laugh, then glance at your own hands. And yep, there they are. Clean crescents under your nails. A low bar by modern standards, maybe, but in this world, it's a miracle. You sit for a moment on the low wall of a drying rack, where leather sheets stretch like prehistoric laundry. The sun is setting, casting everything in a warm gold. The stink of the tannery fades slightly as the temperature drops, and you realize, this isn't just a place of rot. It's a laboratory. They're not calling it soap, but they're living in it. Covered by it. Using it as both a weapon and a shield. Against filth. Against decay. Against the sheer messiness of being human in a world without plumbing. Here's what you've started to understand: the invention of soap wasn't a single event. It was 100,000 tiny, foul-smelling, blister-handed accidents. It was people like this, tanners, cooks, priests, kids with dirty bowls, discovering, repeating, and refining something that made their lives even a little less disgusting. And in this stink, in this mess, they found clarity. Not by studying, not by theorizing, but by scraping and stirring and scrubbing until something useful foamed up from the filth. As night falls, a few of the workers splash water over their arms, rubbing away the chemical slurry. It's not glamorous. It's not even really soap as you'd recognize it. But it works. Their skin shines under the firelight. Cracked, yes. But cleaner. Calmer. And that matters. You rise and walk away from the pits, the smell still clinging to your clothes like a second skin. But now you're not just holding your breath, you're holding on to the realization that even here, surrounded by rot, something beautiful was taking shape. Something that would one day sit beside your modern sink, wrapped in pastel paper and promising lavender dreams. But it started here. In a pit of lye. With a tanner cursing the flies. You sleep rough that night, tucked beneath an awning beside a shuttered stall, the scent of laurel and lime still lingering in your nose. When dawn peeks over the rooftops, you rise slowly, stretch your arms, and follow your ears toward the sound of water, steady, rushing, and natural. Outside the city walls, past the olive groves and drying fields, a wide stream cuts through the landscape. This is where the women gather. Not temple priests or traders. Just everyday women, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, hauling buckets, wringing out tunics, shouting across the bank with the kind of ease born from doing the same thing every morning for 20 years. You stay back at first. It feels intimate, like you're intruding on a secret ritual. But the women hardly notice you. They're too busy scrubbing. And then you see it again. That unmistakable grey paste. A smear across a flat river stone. One woman rubs it into her garment, using both fists to grind the soap into the cloth. Her knuckles are calloused, her arms strong. She dips the fabric into the stream and holds it up. The stain's gone. Not faded. Gone. This isn't Aleppo soap. It's not neat or mold or cured in a shaded courtyard. It's homemade. Rustic. Maybe even cruder than what the tanners use. But it works. And more than that, it's passed down. Taught. You hear a girl asking her mother, "How much ash?" The woman answers, "Just enough to feel the sting in your nose. Not enough to burn your fingers." Which, sure, sounds like a risky chemistry lesson, but it's also surprisingly precise. Historians still argue whether soap making was a household skill or a trade secret. Some believe it was locked behind the walls of professional guilds. Others claim women in ancient Syria were the true custodians of soap, whispering recipes to each other between chores, refining the craft one bucket at a time. This morning by the river seems to vote for the latter. Fringe tidbit: there are ancient records, fragments, really hinting that certain villages had soap women who specialized in preparing these cleansing pastes for weddings and festivals. Some even wove prayers into the mixing process, believing that spoken words gave the soap more power to banish illness or bad luck. And maybe they were right. You sit on a warm rock and watch a grandmother roll a ball of thick grey soap between her palms. It's heavy and gritty. She presses a thumb into its center to check if it's cured enough, then sets it aside to dry on a reed mat. Her granddaughter reaches out for it and is swatted away. Some things take time. Later, you help rinse linens at the edge of the stream. One woman laughs at how soft your hands are. "Aleppo must have spoiled you," she says. She offers a chunk of her homemade paste. You rub it between your fingers and feel the sharp bite of ash, the dull slickness of tallow, and the unmistakable drag of something very real. It leaves behind the faint scent of wood smoke and thyme. You glance at the pile beside her, lumpy little bricks, shaped not by molds but by hand. They're not pretty. They crack at the edges. Some crumble. But each one has a purpose. Some will go home. Others will be traded at market. A few, she says, will be gifted to a young bride whose new house smells too much like men. You're beginning to realize that soap is more than a cleaning agent. It's a kind of power. A quiet, invisible one. It transforms objects. It soothes wounds. It separates the clean from the unclean in ways both literal and cultural. And in the hands of women by the river, it becomes something even more than that. It becomes knowledge. You ask one of them how she learned to make it. She shrugs. My mother. And hers. And hers. She points to the stream. The water tells you when it's right. You stand, your feet now sunk ankle deep in mud. You feel lighter, calmer, clean in a way that has nothing to do with your skin. Maybe it's the rhythm of the work. Maybe it's the quiet magic of seeing generations of women turn ashes and oil into something transformative. Maybe it's the realization that even though no one here is writing down formulas or measuring pH levels, they're getting it right. Not by science, by memory, by smell, by the way the bubbles look as they float downstream and vanish. You leave the river behind, your tunic now a little cleaner, your hands a little softer, and your thoughts strangely heavier. It's one thing to witness the chemical miracle of soap, it's another to see it nested so deeply in people's daily lives that they barely notice it's special. You walk back toward the city, taking a side route through the marketplace. It's early, but the stalls are already alive with clamor. Dates, figs, leather, brass, fabrics, and, tucked in a corner like an afterthought, a table stacked with waxy greenish blocks. You blink. Is that soap? The merchant sees your look and smirks. From the east, he says. Aleppo. Finest stuff. Laurel oil. Heals your skin, keeps demons off your door, makes you irresistible to your neighbor's wife. You arch a brow. He shrugs. Mostly just the first two. The packaging is simple, just wrapped in thin cloth and sealed with a faint charcoal stamp. The price? High. For something that's still mostly fat and ash, it's being sold like it's perfume. And people are buying it. Not by the bagful, but in careful pieces, gifts, perhaps. Ritual objects. Luxuries. You drift past more stalls and realize something's happening. Soap is leaving the house, the river, the tannery. It's entering the market. Historians still argue whether this moment, soap becoming a trade good, was driven by hygiene, medicine, or status. Likely, it was a blend. In cities like Aleppo, Anch, and eventually across the Mediterranean, soap became something people were willing to pay for. Not just because it cleaned, but because it symbolized something: sophistication, wealth, even piety. Here's the fringe tidbit. Some merchants sold soap with inscriptions, brief phrases carved or stamped into the curing blocks. Things like blessed skin, made from sacred fire, or ward off plague. Whether or not these claims held water, or lie, the sales pitch worked. Soap wasn't just practical, it was magical. And in this market, magic is always in high demand. You spot a woman haggling with a seller over a small block that's darker than the others, with a smell somewhere between olives and iron. She swears it cured her son's skin disease. The seller says that's because it was cured under the full moon. You resist the urge to ask if moonlight affects lie potency, but the myth is too charming to kill. Soap is becoming legend. You duck into a shaded stall where an older man is kneeling over a scale, measuring portions of resin, ash, and oil. He doesn't sell soap. He sells ingredients. The raw stuff. The building blocks. You ask him why people don't just buy the ready-made bars. He spits sideways and grumbles something about cheaters and lazy hands. To make it right, he says, you have to feel it. He grabs a handful of crushed laurel berries and shoves it under your nose. You know it's good when it smells like old trees and fresh blood. Charming guy. But he has a point. The people still making soap by hand aren't just artisans. They're protectors of an old process that's suddenly being swallowed by demand. Curing time gets rushed. Ingredients get cut. Ashes that once came from sacred fires now come from whatever burns quickest. And still it sells. You buy a small piece. Just to hold it. It's warm from the sun, dense, and chalky around the edges. It smells, right. Like everything you've seen, compressed into a single square. You leave the market and find a shady spot to sit, watching the crowd swirl around. Everyone here is in motion, carrying baskets, pulling carts, shouting prices, passing down recipes whispered across generations. And you realize something. Soap is no longer just a thing that happens in the background of daily life. It's a commodity. And with that change comes a shift in how people think about cleanliness. It's not just a necessity. It's a choice. A sign of status. A gesture of self-care or even of faith. Now, when you wash, you're not just scrubbing away dirt. You're participating in a culture. You're proving you belong to a certain class. You're announcing to the world, I have the means to be clean. You think back to the grandmother by the river, the tanner in the pit, the priest with his copper bowl. They weren't selling anything. They were just surviving, honoring tradition, keeping their skin whole. But here, in the marketplace, their quiet work is being reshaped, rebranded, and yes, sold. And maybe that's okay. Because every culture has to evolve. Every invention has to travel. And the moment someone places a block of soap on a market stall and says, "This will change your life," something new is born. Not just soap, but a legacy. You tuck your bar into the fold of your tunic and move on. Somewhere down the road, someone's going to make a fortune off this stuff. But you know the truth. It started with ash, and fat, and an accident. You wander beyond the city again, this time following the winding road that hugs the hills. The sun is high now, bright and unflinching. A few goats clatter past, driven by a shepherd whose skin shines from both sweat and age. He nods at you. You nod back. Then, over the next rise, you see it, a cluster of buildings that look cleaner, smoother, built from stone and care. You're approaching a bathhouse. Yes, those exist in Syria too. Not just Roman extravagance. Bathing culture, in one form or another, predates togas and tiled floors. And here in the Near East, long before indoor plumbing and soap dispensers, people still knew the value of a good soak. The bathhouse is modest. No mosaics. No marble lions. Just a long room with a fire pit for heating water, stone benches, and big clay cisterns for mixing hot and cold. But the layout? Familiar. Controlled heat. Staged cleansing. Ritual order. You duck inside. It's warm, not scalding, but the air hugs your skin with a wet, earthy weight. A few men lounge on the benches, pouring water over their shoulders with wooden ladles. Steam curls from the walls, catching in your throat and eyes. Then, in the far corner, you see it, a low table with several small clay jars and a block of something green-grey. A man in a linen wrap dips his fingers into a jar, rubs it into his hair, then lathers it over his chest. Not much foam, but enough. Soap. This isn't market-sold. It's communal. Made by someone local, probably tailored for the bathhouse's heat and humidity. And used not just for function, but for comfort. You approach slowly, and a boy near the fire gestures you over. He's heating water in a bronze pot. "Oil or ash?" he asks. You blink. He holds up two bowls, one with thick, golden oil, the other with a gritty grey paste. You point to the paste. He nods, scoops a dollop, and motions you toward a bench. He rubs the paste between his palms first, warming it, coaxing it. Then he spreads it across your arms and shoulders with surprising delicacy. His technique is methodical, circular, pressure at just the right points. He uses a cloth to wipe you down, dipping it in warm water and wringing it out over your skin. There's a subtle sizzle as the soap interacts with the warmth. And then, release. Your skin feels lighter. Not just cleaner. Unburdened. Historians still argue whether ancient bathhouses in the Syrian region adopted soap-making practices from local women, temples, or trade caravans. But the evidence suggests it was a hybrid, each source influencing the other until soap was as much a part of the ritual as the water itself. Fringe tidbit: there's a belief that bathhouse attendants like this boy were unofficial skin doctors, trained to recognize and treat rashes, infections, or signs of bad diet just by touch. Some had favorite soap mixtures they swore by, often combining soap paste with ground herbs or minerals. Not for scent, for healing. As you lean back, you notice others doing the same. Conversations are murmured. Eyes are half closed. One man quietly recites a verse as he pours water over his chest. This is less about getting clean, and more about being whole. You're starting to understand something deeper. Soap is no longer an accident, a side effect of burning fat or cleaning hides. It's become part of ritualized care, of healing. It's woven into leisure, status, and medicine. It has purpose beyond hygiene. And in this bathhouse, it's practically holy. After your scrub, you dry off with a thick linen towel and walk slowly through the cooling chamber. The air is thinner here, fresher. A man passes by and nods in approval, maybe at your clean skin, maybe at the calm in your eyes. You're not sure. On the way out, you spot a row of small jars stacked on a shelf, soap blends for sale. Some with bay laurel, others with crushed myrtle or salt. The attendant says each has its own purpose. This one for the joints. This one for coughs. This one for when your wife's angry and you need to smell like someone else. You chuckle. Then you pause. Because now you realize soap has found a home in wellness. In luxury. In daily life. It's no longer just a reaction to mess. It's a pursuit of something better. You walk out into the bright sun, feeling a little lighter. Not just because your skin is scrubbed clean, but because you've just witnessed a piece of the human story most people never think about, how something as humble as soap can evolve into comfort, ritual, even love. And it all started with fire, fat, and some poor soul trying to scrape a pot clean. The air outside the bathhouse smells different now, like olive leaves crushed between warm stones, like steam clinging to sunlight. You breathe it in, slowly, feeling the warmth settle deep in your chest. You don't quite want to go back into the city. You want to follow the scent a little longer. So you do. You walk until buildings thin and the sky stretches wider, until the road becomes less of a road and more of a suggestion. Ahead, you spot a caravan pitched by a spring, resting under the crooked shade of an old fig tree. Camels grunt lazily. Men sit on folded rugs, sipping from wide, earthen cups. And stacked in tight pyramids at the edge of their encampment, blocks of soap. Not Aleppo soap. Not quite. These are smaller, rounder, some stamped with symbols you don't recognize. One looks like a palm tree. Another like a moon. You approach slowly, and one of the traders gestures toward the stacks. From the coast, he says. Tripoli. Sometimes Sidon. If you like it sharp, that's where you go. You pick up a bar. It smells saltier, earthier. The laurel scent is there, but it rides behind something muskier, like sea brine and charcoal. The color leans more toward tan than green, and unlike the smooth molds of Aleppo, these are clearly shaped by hand, no two quite alike. You've wandered into a crossroad. Because now, soap isn't just something you make in your backyard or buy in the market. Now it travels. Now it has accents. Historians still argue when regional brands of soap began to develop across the Levant and Mediterranean. Some suggest it began with caravans like this one, traders bringing local variations from coastal cities, oases, or highland villages. Others believe it was driven by necessity, different plants, different ashes, different water qualities leading to different chemical results. Fringe tidbit: Some coastal soaps used seawater instead of freshwater for their lye solutions, creating bars that held up better in humid climates. Sailors often favored these, swearing they stayed dry even when soaked, which sounds like nonsense, but makes a kind of poetic sense when you're living at sea. You're handed a cup of warm tea by one of the older traders, who tells you, between sips, how his grandfather swore by soap from byblos, while his father imported blocks wrapped in date leaves from Egypt. "My sons," he says with a shrug. "They like the one that smells like rose hips." Teenagers. He makes a face, then chuckles. You ask him how long he's been selling soap. "Longer than you've been alive," he says. "And I'll tell you this, it's like wine. Every valley has a blend. Every maker has a secret." He's not wrong. As you listen to the caravan traders swap stories about deliveries lost to flash floods, about a bar of soap gifted to a prince, about a woman who made soap with crushed garnet dust, you realize something important. Soap has become regional. It's got roots now. And roots. It's developed character, identity, and it's moving. You sit with them as the sun dips low, and the traders slice dried fruit and crack jokes about whose feet smell worst after 3 days on the road. And through it all, they're surrounded by blocks of soap that carry stories, heritage, and even a bit of pride. You remember the stiff-necked tanner who thought only his method mattered. Or the bathhouse attendant who warmed the soap in his palms like a prayer. But here, among the caravan, it's a celebration of difference. Every recipe is welcomed. Every variation tested. There are no rules, only results. One of the younger men tosses you a bar before you leave. "Try that one," he says. "Has olive pit ash. It bites." You slip it into your satchel and nod your thanks. As you walk away, you glance back once. The camp glows orange under the final stretch of daylight, and the soap stacks catch the firelight like treasure. Because they are treasure. Quiet, handmade, aromatic proof that even something as mundane as soap can become a story worth sharing, preserving, and protecting. You're starting to see how it all connects, temple to tannery, bathhouse to caravan. The slow invention of soap wasn't just chemical. It was cultural. A braid of ideas stretched across regions and languages and generations. And with every hand that stirred, stamped, or carried a bar, the idea grew. You wake the next morning to the sound of camel bells fading into the distance. The caravan is gone, but its scent lingers, resinous, spicy, and faintly laurel-laced. You stretch, tuck your soap sample deeper into your satchel, and make your way down the slope toward the next village. This one's quieter, smaller. The kind of place where goats outnumber people and everyone knows everyone's grandmother by her nickname. You ask around, gently, about soap. And soon enough, you're pointed toward a low mud brick house with a plume of white smoke rising from the back. You follow your nose. And it leads you to her. She's bent over a wide, blackened pot set on stones, stirring something thick and green with a carved wooden paddle longer than your leg. Her face is a map of time, sun-darkened, crease-lined, with sharp eyes that dart to you before you can even say hello. "You're late," she says. You blink. She smirks. "If you're here to learn, grab the paddle. If you're just here to ask questions, I'll answer them after." You grab the paddle. The pot is hot, sticky, and impossibly heavy. You stir as best you can, arms trembling under the weight. She watches like a hawk, correcting your rhythm with sharp claps and sharper words. You stir too fast, it breaks. Too slow, it burns. Just like people. You can't help but grin. This is the soap witch. Every village has one, or at least, they used to. Women, usually women, who weren't just soap makers but herbalists, midwives, healers. Half respected, half feared. Because their craft worked. And because nobody fully understood why. She tosses in a handful of dried herbs, thyme, maybe, or chamomile, and the scent shifts instantly. Softer. Warmer. She sniffs the air. Nods. You keep stirring. This isn't a commercial operation. There's no packaging. No weighing. No recipe written down anywhere. But every motion she makes is deliberate. Seasoned. Etched into her bones. Historians still argue whether soap making at this level was tied more to medicine or magic. There's evidence for both. In some villages, soap was stored next to healing balms and salves. In others, it was buried under thresholds to ward off evil spirits. And sometimes, it was used to clean the dead, one last gift before burial. Fringe tidbit: certain Syrian mountain communities believed soap mixed with pomegranate peel could close wounds that hadn't yet opened, a poetic way of describing its ability to prevent illness. Or maybe a warning. Depends on how you read it. As the soap thickens, she scoops a dollop and presses it into your palm. Too soft, she says. Needs another hour. Sit. You sit. She pours you mint tea, scalding and sweet, and talks without prompting. About how her grandmother learned to make soap during a drought, when every drop of oil was precious and ash had to be gathered from the last good fire of the season. About how soap was used to bathe babies, bless marriages, mark new homes. How the first bar she ever made fell apart in her hands, and how she cried for 2 hours, then tried again. You don't just make soap, she says. You raise it. Like bread. Like children. You nod, because there's nothing else to do. You watch the pot bubble and darken, the mixture slowly taking on the right consistency, thick, smooth, just barely clingy. She tests it with her fingers, presses it into an old wooden mold, and sets it on a flat stone to cool. The next morning, she'll slice it. Then cure it for weeks. Maybe months. This is not fast work. This is not convenient. But it's real. You realize, sitting there with tea in hand and ash under your fingernails, that this soap, this humble bar of fat and ash and laurel, is the product of memory more than invention. It's not some ancient patent. It's a living tradition. Passed down by touch. Preserved not in books, but in hands like hers. She gives you a small, rough block as you leave. It's not pretty, she says. But it'll keep you clean. And honest. You thank her, tuck it beside the caravan bar, and walk down the hill with the scent of thyme and wood smoke clinging to your sleeves. Soap has officially become sacred. Not in the grand temple sense, but in the everyday sense. The kind that lives in basins and barrels, in stories told over hot tea, in the way her hand hovered above the pot, not measuring, but remembering. And you know now, for every scroll and statue history preserves, there are 10,000 silent things like this, shaping the world in ways no one records. You carry her soap like it's fragile, even though it isn't. It's firm, heavy, and slightly tacky at the edges from the heat. Still, it feels like you're holding something rare, not because it's scarce, but because it was made slowly, with care, by someone who knew exactly when the mixture would turn just by the sound of the stir. Back on the road, your mind drifts. You've seen soap in temples, in bathhouses, tanneries, rivers, and caravans. You've stirred it, shaped it, sniffed it, and scrubbed it over your own arms. It's been mystical and mundane, sacred and smelly, a product and a potion. But now, as you descend into yet another city, a port this time, you see the final form it takes. Commerce. Here, soap isn't just traded. It's branded. The streets of this port city thrum with movement. Sailors, scribes, market barkers, fishmongers, children carrying loaves, and goats carrying nothing. The smell is a storm, sea air and sweat, citrus peels crushed underfoot, salt, oil, fish, wood, and yes, soap. Dozens of kinds. All displayed with flair. There are stalls with pale yellow bars wrapped in cloth stamped with the sun. Others stacked in pyramids with tiny dyed ribbons threaded through each one. Some glisten with added oil. Others are dusted with powder. Names you don't recognize, Sunfire Cleanser, Moon Rinse, Sacred Skin Cake, jostle for your attention. And for the first time, you see someone shouting, only 3 dinars. Real laurel oil. Better than that northern garbage. A rivalry. You smile. Historians still argue whether soap's true expansion into trade empires happened by accident or clever marketing. Some point to the rise of merchant families who cornered regional production, while others say it was the sea routes that did it, caravans reaching ports, and ports sending bars across continents. Fringe tidbit. In some cities, early soap sellers carved symbols into their bars not just for branding, but to show allegiance. Some bore marks of specific temples, others of guilds, or even political factions. Clean skin, it turns out, could be a political statement. You stroll the market, ears full of merchant pitches, arms bumped by baskets, and eyes dazzled by the sheer variety. A young woman with ink-stained fingers shows you a slab she's just pressed with a carved stone block. Every bar tells a story, she says. This one means washed by the stars. Romantic, right? You ask her if she makes the soap. She laughs. No. My brother does. I just make them sell. And there it is, the next evolution. Soap has become something to package, to name, to position on a shelf beside other soaps and hope it's chosen because of the way it looks, or smells, or, let's be honest, because someone said it would make your skin softer than your neighbor's. You watch her stack the bars into a tidy display, curved lines, a tray of dried lavender beside it, a little brass mirror for good measure. A small crowd forms, noses wrinkling, coins clinking. It's brilliant. You'd buy it too. And then you hear someone mutter behind you, it's not even real laurel oil. They just say it is. You turn to find a man in dusty robes, arms crossed, scowling at the whole spectacle. They cut it with almond and sheep fat. It won't last a week. He sees the bar sticking out of your satchel, the rough one the soap which gave you, and his eyes soften slightly. That's real soap, he says. Made slow. Made right. You thank him. He walks away, grumbling about tourists. And now you're stuck in the middle. On one hand, tradition, skill, time, and reverence. On the other, speed, convenience, shine, and slogans. Neither side is entirely wrong. This is what always happens, isn't it? Something starts as survival, becomes a craft, grows into ritual, and eventually turns into merchandise. It doesn't mean it's lost its soul, but the soul gets stretched. Worn thinner. Decorated for display. You sit for a while on a low wall beside the harbor, watching crates of soap being loaded onto ships. Some labeled. Some not. A sailor takes a bar from a crate, sniffs it, shrugs, and pockets it. He probably doesn't know where it came from. Doesn't know the grandmother who stirred it, or the boy who scraped lye from a burned barrel, or the priest who sprinkled it with cinnamon oil. But he'll wash with it. And that's enough. Soap, in all its forms, continues to move. And with it, quietly, invisibly, the fingerprints of the people who made it. You take out the soap from your satchel. The rough one. You press your thumb into its uneven side. You can still smell the time. Still feel the weight of that blackened pot. And you promise yourself, no matter how many labels they slap on soap from now on, you'll remember what it really is. Fat. Ash. Time. Care. And 1,000 stubborn hands refusing to let it be forgotten. You linger in the port city for another day, watching the tide roll in and out, the soap crates rise and vanish into ships headed west, north, even as far as Gaul and Hispania. But now it's time to return, not just to the road, but to the story you've been following like a thread winding through temples, tanneries, riverbanks, and fire pits. So you backtrack. Not to the same place, but to the same feeling. You follow the dry roads east, beyond the cities and bathhouses, past groves and goat paths, into a flat stretch of dust and wind. There, nestled into a curve of hills, is a cluster of homes. You're not looking for a merchant this time, or a priest, or even a soap witch. You're looking for the silence that comes after something is made. The space where knowledge has settled. You find it in the form of an old courtyard with low walls, stacked jars, and a scent so familiar now it almost disappears into your breath: olive oil, wood smoke, and laurel. A man is stirring something in a wide bronze bowl. Slowly, casually. He looks up at you, squints, then nods. "You're late," he says. You smile. No one ever seems surprised that you've come looking for soap. Maybe because people like him have always been waiting. Quietly, patiently, doing the same work their parents did. Not for profit, not for prestige, but because the work needs doing. And here's the thing, they're still experimenting. The man gestures to several rows of tiny pots, each filled with a different mixture. Some are smoother, some grainier. One leans so heavily into crushed herbs it looks like it was rolled in grass. He picks one up and lets you smell it. "New one," he says. "Fig ash. Bit of honey. My wife swears it makes your skin feel like you haven't done a day of work in your life." You both laugh, and for a while, he tells you stories about trial batches gone wrong, bars that cured too fast or melted too slow, and the occasional customer who insists the best soap is the kind that hurts a little going on. Historians still argue whether ancient Syrians ever intentionally standardized their soap making. Some say there were families that passed down precise proportions. Others think it stayed in the realm of intuition, forever tied to feel, sound, and scent. Like music without sheet notes. Fringe tidbit: some older soap makers believed in testing soap with the singing finger, a technique where you rub a fresh bar between your fingers and then flick the resulting paste. If it sings a high squeak, like damp slate, it's done. If it doesn't, it needs more time. Or more laurel. Or just more patience. You try it. Yours doesn't sing. The man laughs again. You'll get there. And that's when it hits you, not just what soap is, or how it came to be, but why it stayed. Because it was never just about keeping clean. It was about noticing, remembering, passing something useful, something almost magical, across generations. Not through writing, but through repetition. Touch. Mistakes. Adjustments. Wisdom, measured in bubbles. You stand at the edge of the courtyard, looking out over the hills, and you wonder how many more hands are doing the same thing right now. In a different village. With different ingredients. And the same quiet devotion. Soap, in the end, isn't a single invention. It's a slow unraveling of messy human need into something gentle. Something foamy. Something that doesn't just remove dirt, but invites peace. Order. Even pride. You close your eyes and breathe it in one last time. The oil. The ash. The laurel. The life. And now, as the night settles and the edges of the story soften, you can almost feel the warmth of that old courtyard wrapping around you. The fire is low now. The mixing bowl is empty. And the soap, still curing, rests in quiet rows, waiting patiently for time to do what heat and hands cannot. You let the memory of laurel oil drift through your senses. It sent a lullaby more ancient than writing, more familiar than language. Somewhere, someone is still stirring a batch, watching the bubbles rise and fall, whispering to the mixture like it's a secret worth keeping. Which, of course, it is. Your thoughts drift like lye through water, slow, dissolving, settling into calm. You think of the riverbank women, the bathhouse steam, the grumbling tanner, the traders with their spice-scented bars. You remember the soap witch's hands, steady as stone, and the singing finger test you failed with a smile. And you realize now you're not just cleaner. You're quieter. So let yourself drift. Let the weight fall from your shoulders like old grime rinsed away in warm water. Let your breath slow. Let your eyes soften. The story is over, but its traces linger like the gentle scent of soap clinging to your skin long after the water's gone cold. You are washed in history. You are steeped in care. You are exactly where you need to be. Good night.